I have Verineia Codrean with me, who, because in the previous session, we talked about virtual presentations, but a lot of people are asking me, and a lot of clients are actually asking us, okay, how can we handle disruptions? What is the best way to handle all these situations that might come up during a presentation? So we are very happy to have Verineia here, who is I would say a person who really enjoys life. I've known her for quite some time now, and the first time that we met, it was in Stockholm, where we did a session in this incredible workspace called Epicenter there. So we had a nice pizza, and we had a lot of talk about what are the challenges that she faces when she is coaching executives from all over the world. So she lives actually in some of the really interesting places in the world. Now she's based in Tromsø, Norway, so she's very close to the Arctic, and other times she lives in Hong Kong. But she can tell a little bit more about herself. So hi, Verineia.
Hello, Eva. Thank you for having me today.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you, and I cannot wait for your session.
Well, let's do it then. And I'm very glad that you took this opportunity to think about, apart from the content of the presentations and what we put down in those presentations, as well as how to package them and how to deliver them for maximum impact. However, we may put a lot of time and effort into what the presentation is going to look like, but we do know from countless presentations that we have been at that sometimes disruption happen and they may affect entirely our presentation and leave a bad taste after it. So how do we handle all the disruptions that happen around us, from a tech disruption to an audience disruption, or even to some tricky questions? That's what we are going to discuss today. When we are thinking about the presentation, we are going to go into the idea of handling the disruptions in a bit of a more an unusual way. Because whereas I can, of course, tell you that you can go and get coached by people that are helping with that, with PR training, when an executive has, or a founder of a startup has a disruption to handle, or a PR interview, you're going to have a lot of techniques to use. But today, I really want to give you something tangible that you are going to be able to actually implement right away and get going. What I'm going to do, Eva is going to help me out as well in some of the parts. If you have questions, and please do ask it, because that's what is your opportunity to handle. But a lot of times when we think how to handle disruptions, we are thinking of, some of us are going into one extreme of actually trying to anticipate every single possible disruption. However, others are going completely opposite and praying to God that no disruption is going to happen. All we have to do is think of the things that are under our control, the things that we can control, and absolutely not worry about the ones that we cannot. So what I want you to have at the end is that you have a massive disruption, and your attitude and your take on this is going to be as easy as nothing happens, because you are a pro at handling those disruptions. So when we are thinking about it, what you say is absolutely more important. That's absolutely crucial, because everyone is an expert in the area that they are delivering the presentation. However, I'm an avid advocate for the fact that the way you deliver that message is absolutely more crucial. So one of the most interesting experiences that happened with one of my clients is that when he had the live meeting in one that he wanted to sell his company to one of the conglomerates in Asia, he has been chasing somebody for a meeting for 6 months. So you can imagine that this has been something that was in the presentation and preparation for 6 months. When he got there, he has been told that, unfortunately, as you know, schedule after schedule got bumped, and his presentation got moved to maybe the next day, which was not even possible that would happen. He flew, however, from London all the way to Shanghai, so he was not letting that to chance. He said, is there any way I can still pitch today? And they told him that this executive can fit him in the 5 minutes that he will be working from the conference room, where his last meeting that was overlapping with all the other schedule that was happening, to his car that will bring him to the airport. So all he had were those 2 minutes that he will be walking with that executive. And of course, he didn't have the pitch deck that he could present. He didn't have any asset that he could present. It was a very fast, brisk walk towards the car. All he had were 2 minutes that will be either life-changing or destroying his past 6 months and the dream of working with this company. And at the end, thankfully, somebody could say that you got lucky that you got those 2 minutes and you actually pitch your company. But it's not luck and it's not thankfully. It's the fact that not necessarily what he said, because that, of course, was important. But executives like this are pitched amazing ideas every single day. They are either pitched directly, by mail, or by any other opportunity. So what he said was not as important, by the way, as the way he delivered. So the way he presented, his enthusiasm, his commitment, and the way he packaged that presentation was very impactful. And that's what proves again that why I advocate so ardently for the way to not only concentrate on the text, on the content of your presentation, but as well on the how. So your presence, your body and voice are going to give you that boost that you need in order to make them even a disruption that comes around your way. And I'm going to explain you later how is going to give you the full control of the situation, as well as originality. And I don't want to give you tips that you are going to see on any other YouTube video or search on Google. This is not what we are all about here today. I'm going to give you something under the radar, but it's going to make your presentation 10 times better if you do that. So the body language is the silent message that is transmitted. Because in one way, if we think that when you hear the text, I am so excited to be here, and if you are so excited to be here, you can say it with a monotonous voice and with a voice that is not going to actually transmit the gravitas of your message. Guys, I am so excited to be here today, and I will be sharing with you this presentation that is all about body language and is all about how to navigate your voice. You see, even if I'm saying the right words, it is not committing and it's not actually delivering the message that I want you to know. However, if you think that what you say is actually delivered by how you say it, you reshape the way you prepare your presentation. And here's a really cool example that I remember from my admission exam to theater. I was 4 years a theater actress, and that's what I learned this. My first exam was as following. We're paired with people in group of 2 with somebody we never met before, and we had to do an exercise that was very interesting. They asked us what secondary languages we speak, and then they paired us with somebody who never spoke that language or never knew what the meaning of the words that we would be saying. And we were given a message. My message was, I need help, and I had to deliver it in my native language. I had to deliver that, whereas the other person could not understand my language. And yet, the way I carried the message was much more important. And we were judged by the fact of if the person understood what you meant and if the person took action on what you meant. And the second exercise was I had to say, I love you to the other person by using the word lamp. So you can imagine that the words in here were really secondary, if not tertiary, to the actual message. The way I would package that message was much more important. And that's what I want you to take home today. Because if the speaker is low energy, no enthusiasm, and using a monotonous voice, this is not going to help the message. So in this case, you can present the most interesting subject. You can speak about saving the humanity or having a revolutionary solution for curing some very incredible and sad diseases. And yet, if you are not talking from a place of enthusiasm, unfortunately, you are going to lose the audience. So what do we do with that? The first thing to keep in mind is the voice. The voice is the one that is going to carry the way you handle your presentation and the way you're going to later on handle the disruptions and handle the questions as well. So what do? A lot of times we have presentations that will carry on the message or the presentation in one direct line. And all I want you to do is think of this as something that evolves and all the time is a dynamic way of the presentation. And what or how do we train this? I'm going to guide you towards TikTok. You may know TikTok for the silly videos teenagers do. However, this is a wealth of information. A lot of experts and a lot of people that will usually not do a YouTube video or a podcast or write an article are going to share their expertise. And here is an example that I found of a voice actor that is sharing with you how you can actually exercise the way your voice fluctuates. He is giving you exactly 50 seconds, 4 scripts, and 4 emotions for you to work on that information. Imagine if you research this on Google or you look on YouTube, you may find a video that is 22 minutes long, and yet at the end, you still don't know what to do. Here, you have message and information delivered in 60 seconds that is going to leave you much more prepared as opposed to something that is going to be a longer video. Definitely search by these hashtags, by the voice coaching or the upbeat information, and you are going to love. People are actually having a lot of fun. It's gamifying the way you use your voice for a more impactful presentation. And the next part is something, again, very important. We have a deep attention deficit. There was a study done recently where they showed that 67% of entrepreneurs are listening to audiobooks and to podcasts at 1.5 or even 2 times speed. This means that if you actually speak in a voice that somebody is just not used to at that speed and they cannot press you to go forward, unfortunately, the choice is going to be that they are going to either disconnect from the message or not follow along, and they are going to take to do something else on the side, and you don't want that. So yes, you notice that I speak very fast. This is not about you mimicking somebody else's speed. It's really to play around and find the speed and be aware of the fact that more people, even if for you it's not the most a comfortable way to listen at 1.5 or 2 times speed, keep in mind that a large percentage of population does this already. And you need to make sure that if you want a presentation to keep engaged, your audience needs to include this high percentage of people that are really, really used to a higher speed. So what do we do here? I am going to direct you back to TikTok again, where professional news anchors are never going to put this on YouTube because they have no capacity to film this on a longer format. And yet, within 60 seconds, they are giving you scripts, exactly the teleprompters that they use for actual news, and you can actually exercise along. And a lot of people are duetting these videos, and you can see the same exact script read in multiple versions. This is a fantastic exercise for you to try that is going to 10x your presentation, your rhythm, your cadence, your voice, without actually diving into long trainings or hiring a coach specialist like myself to actually help you. You can do this by yourself with just 60 seconds a day, or just give it a try because you are going to love it. And I'm sure you'll spend a little bit longer than 60 seconds. And now we're coming to my favorite part. My favorite part is rehearsal. It comes from theater or it comes from multiple other industries like politicians, TV anchors, actors. The ones that you see being spontaneous and seeing that they are thinking on their feet and they are coming up with really witty, brilliant, smart answers. We think that they are doing this because basically it's something that they are born or they have some sort of talent, but it's not that. It's a ton of work, ton of preparation before that actually allows you to be spontaneous. And let me show you how. One of the examples that I want you to look at is the TV series Suits. This is a brilliant example of how to think fast on your feet and how to deliver something that leaves an impact and a very interesting and not something we may think of as an example. What do? A lot of times when they have this high-heated situation, they quote other movies. They are quoting a lot of Top Gun and they are quoting a lot of Godfather. What does this do to our presentation? A lot of times we see presenters using quotes, and it's not a bad thing. However, we cannot relate to Confucius, which is an ancient thinker from China, which I admire a lot, but I cannot relate to him. What it does when we make a reference from something that people can relate to closer, Godfather, Top Gun, or Suits, or any other favorite TV movies, Game of Thrones, for instance, it is going to resonate much more for 2 reasons. First reason is because we know the context better. We root for those characters. And when we hear a quote from there being thrown into the conversation, or when we present or something for a more bigger impact, what it does is that it brings over the entire gravitas of the context from where that quote was done. So we are not anymore about the quotes from the past century, where there's very smart quotes of philosophers and thinkers and those that really shape the way we are acting today. However, we are not resonating very close to that. So I'd rather think of this as a choice and as a way to drive your presentation in a way that you can actually be spontaneous by having some well-fitted phrases that are going to actually carry on a presentation. Because spontaneity, once again, comes from preparation. And it used to be that my worst fear was a black screen, either when I present on stage as a disruption that it completely goes blank, or it actually happened some time ago when I was doing a high-stake presentation over the internet with clients that were completely on the other side of the world, and my screen went black. It was a complete mistake on my end, and it was not something I could blame anyone for. But when you go back online, what do you do? And now I'll tell you exactly what I did, which carried a presentation that after that I have been contacted and asked if I did that on purpose. What happened is that when the screen went black, of course, I quickly found the solution to go back online. And what I did, I went right away and I used a quote from a Game of Thrones, which you might know, is Lannister always pays his debts. So I used that and said, a Lannister, you know, guys, a Lannister always pays his debt. So I am buying everyone a beer after this for this disruption. And then I jumped right in. I didn't apologize. I didn't make much more fuss, or I didn't draw the attention towards this. And that's exactly what it is. Because when you're prepared and when you have something that you can reach out in your pocket for a quote or something that everybody can relate and even make them smile, it is going to carry a disruption much easier into the next wave, as opposed to apologizing endlessly and actually making everyone uncomfortable for this moment. And you're going to jump way faster over this disruption as opposed to doing the other way. So now when we think about disruptions, think not about something that is going to give you a list of the 10 top quotes that you could do, because that's not what I mean. What I mean is that the way you deliver is very, very important. I could have used the same quote if I would have said it in not an energetic, confident voice. I could have used the same exact quote and I would have not gotten the result of me carrying on and being congratulated and actually being asked if I had planned that disruption on purpose. So this is what I want you to take away. There is a combination of factors that when you practice them here and there, and you don't need to spend too much on it, is just be aware of them. It is going to really help you handle your disruptions in a much more professional manner than apologizing for a black screen or trying to see where is the tech team to help you out or fiddling with your papers. However, this is all about the way that you deliver with your voice, with your energy, with your enthusiasm, and with the speed of your voice. And we come now to the second part, which is absolutely something that I adore to see, is how we handle challenging questions. When we have questions that are actually something that we know, this is not something I need to teach you or to give you advice on how to handle. Much more interesting it becomes when you have the questions that are very challenging and you still need to come on top of them. My expertise comes from PR, so I am used to train executives that go in front of the media. There's always looking for a story. And the way media works, they need to find something on you that is going to create a headline. Headline is not going to come out of you answering properly to a question that was very easy fed to you. A question or a headline is going to come from a question that put you in a position where you didn't know how to answer, or you got really cornered, and it's something that really intimidated you. And that's what becomes a media story. So by working with a lot of executives and startup founders that were put in that situation, I'm going to share 3 tips with you today that are going to help you to handle those disruptions. So what we want for questions is always build rapport, because when somebody feels that they can ask you a question, they are actually establishing a bridge between themselves and you and allowing you to know that they have interest in your subject. And also it helps you add credibility because they want to know more about your subject that you are presenting. And in this case, something that you can give them more insight in case you didn't cover that in your presentation. And that is the good scenario, because a lot of times it happens that a question is not going to ask you about your subject, but it's going to express frustration, it's going to try to embarrass you, it's going to be somebody who wants to show off. How many times you've had, well, I just wanted to ask you because, you know, and then they go into a whole life story about themselves. So they are just showing off their expertise, completely undermining yours. Or they want to take control of the agenda of the entire narrative. Do not take the bait. And do not engage into that narrative that they want to set for you. Be smarter than that. And they're going to see exactly how. Acknowledge the depth of the emotion that is being put in the question, but not the emotion itself. So if we have a question that is why doesn't your company seem to care about the blue collar? Insert the subject there that is important. So what you're going to do, you're going to acknowledge the emotion, but you're not going to give it life. So in this case, what we do is, it sounds like blue collar is really important to you. Let me stress how important blue collar is to us as well. With that shared objective, here's what we do for that. So this is a way to handle something that wants to be a hostile type of question, but this is how you navigate and you help shape that question into a shared objective that you actually can answer to. The second trick is to appear a bit confused, especially when a question is very challenging or hostile, and buy yourself time and space. And how you do that is by actually saying that I didn't quite understand the question you're asking. Could you please reframe it in another way? This is going to give you two things. The first thing is going to obviously buy you time to think of a proper answer to that question. And the second thing is going to give that person an opportunity to phrase the question in another way that is not as challenging or aggressive. And that is going to actually help you understand even better the question that they are curious to find out. The third trick is to only speak for yourself. A lot of times when we speak on behalf of our company, we represent an industry or we represent that company. And a lot of times there are multiple views. That's why you see on Twitter or on other social media, when somebody is working for a bigger company, they say views are my own and not necessarily shared by my organization. Because that is a lot of times a way to get someone and make again, a new story out of that when they ask a question about that industry's position or about that industry or about that company's position in a certain challenging situation. So when you speak only for yourself and you get the question of why doesn't the management of your company seem to care about blue collar, in this case, only speak for yourself. I can't speak for all management, but I can tell you what I have done to support blue collar over the past year. And this is how you shift the attention from something that might have a negative narrative to it, something that the company has done, and you really focus on what you can answer and be fully responsible this moment and right now. But these are just some tips and tricks that are going to actually give you a way to look at something that is tackling the presentation in terms of questions that are a little bit more challenging. And that is something to set the stage for our more advanced level. So when we think of the questions, all I want you to remember are three types of questions for you to focus on and practice your delivery in a way to handle them as well as the distractions. So there are three types of questions. One is when you don't know the answer to that question, and that happens. Second is when you can't give an answer because actually either it's confidentiality or for other various reasons. Or the type of questions that are gotcha questions when you are guilty as charged. So what do we do in those questions? A lot of times I've heard the advice of trying to anticipate all the questions that might come after your presentation. And that's a good enough, so to speak, technique. But it's no way for you to be able to anticipate all the questions that are going to come at you. So if you concentrate on these three questions and these three mechanics and understand the mechanics behind these three variations, this is going to give you the confidence to go out there and face all the challenging questions that are going to come at you in a presentation. So what do we do when we get a questions that you don't know the answer to? The first thing, let's look at an example of a question. When is your office in Berlin opening? So let's say you're presenting your startup and you are going to be sometime the entire Europe coverage, but at the moment you don't know the answer to this question. So a very fair answer is I'm not in charge with the decision, so I don't know when, maybe in September 2021. This is not something that is going to leave the audience excited or even satisfied with this type of question, of this type of answer. So what do you do when you have a question that you don't know the answer to? If you don't know the answer, then what you can do is you need to reframe the question in a way that is making something that you can actually answer to. Then be open about not knowing and give some sort of direction of either when you will be able to answer it or who from your team or company can answer to that question. So how do we tackle a question that we don't know the answer to? When is the office in Berlin opening? So you want to know when we open an office in Berlin. To be honest, I don't know when we will. However, I do know that we are expanding and growing in multiple locations across Europe. And we have here our business director manager that can give you more insights after this presentation into some more concrete dates when the office is going to open. So you see, this is how we show confidence and control over the question without actually saying that we don't know the answer to that blank point. So that's what I want you to understand. The way to tackle a question that you don't know the answer to is to really be honest about it, because the consequences of not being honest can bite you later on. So don't do that. Be honest about it, but don't just say, I don't know. Give them something more. And that's the mechanic behind how to tackle a question that you don't know the answer to. Now we go to the second one. It's a bit more tricky. What to do when you cannot answer? You know the answer, but you absolutely cannot mention it in public. Well, let's look at an example. How are the negotiations with legislators going about your business's generated waste, and have you lobbied on getting larger quotas to allow you to produce more waste? Now, that's something you know the answer to because you are actually publicly known as being part of these negotiations. However, this is not something you can share and something not to have some unfortunate repercussions later on. So how do you answer a question like that? First, if you cannot answer, say so, but provide a reason. Give a reason to why you cannot answer. However, one trick here is to provide that restriction that you have of not being able to answer in a more positive way. So one way would be our internal policy is to only share information that is after completed negotiation. However, in top of that, to even give a little bit more satisfaction to the person that asked a question that you cannot share the answer, give them some other relevant information that actually could satisfy them without you revealing the full answer. So let's look again. How do we answer this question? So how are the negotiations with legislators going about your business's generated waste, and have you lobbied on getting larger quotas to allow you to produce more waste? We want to make sure that our business generates as little waste as possible. And as you pointed out, this is not today's reality. However, we are in negotiations with legislators to see how much room we have until we are able to advance our technology to help us reduce the waste. To keep the negotiation process intact, however, it's our policy to not comment on ongoing discussion until it's all formalized and signed. And there, you deliver a very confident answer about the situation without revealing any sensitive information that is going to actually be to your detriment. So this is how you keep control of the narrative of a challenging or a bit even more hostile type of question that is trying to attack you, and something that you actually show empathy for, you acknowledge it, and at the same time you give an answer to it. And the last one is my absolute favorite, the gotcha questions or guilty as charged. Because a lot of times we have an audience, when you present something of a topic that is your expertise, there's always data that is going to contradict that. I challenge you to pick any subject on Google and find for information that supports that information you're looking for, and find information that is the opposite. You're going to find studies and data that are going to support equally the opposite views. So when you have a presentation about an industry, about the ocean of the seas, that you are doing some research in it, and the pollution of the seas, or the fishing industry, there is going to be, of course, information that supports fishing. And there is information that actually says that overfishing, or the way fishing is done today, it's in detriment to the way, to the direction where our planet is going. So this is a type of gotcha question that could be given to any industry or any direction. So what do? Let's look at an example. How do you expect people to buy your product if you want 3% of the cost for the waste reduction to be put onto the customer so you won't lose money? Now, that's a valid question, because you have announced, let's say in a press release before that, that you are going to increase with this 3% that are going to be added to the cost of the product. That's an accurate information. That's something that is public, so you cannot say, you cannot comment on this. So how do you get out of a gotcha question? Well, I've got you. Admit the validity and address the issue. One of the first things to do here is to reframe the question in a way that it gives a bit more of a positive light. You need to change the tone of it so it doesn't have the hostility of the initial question that I was asked. Second thing to do here is to agree and validate the concern expressed by the person who asked the question. And here is your way to shine. You add then a U-turn that is actually going to dispel the concern and is going to bring evidence and explain it. So let's look to this formula in application. So how do you expect people to buy your product if you want the 3% of the cost for waste reduction to go onto the customer so you won't lose money? What I'm hearing is that you are concerned that clients won't buy our product because you have an extra charge for the waste reduction. I think that's a valid concern, and I spend a lot of time thinking about it. Currently, it takes 0.95% extra charge on top of the product cover shipping for the recycling to bring it to the recycling facility. And the 3% you are referring to is increasing the chances of the product to be properly recycled. But we have taken steps to increase the efficiency of the product's recyclability, so none will be burned and actually emit extra CO2. The 3% will allow to add separate containers, so no contamination between our products and other materials will happen. So this is how you provide information and you navigate a really tumultuous and a bit challenging and full with minds type of question that is trying to get at you and is trying to intimidate you and put you in a bad light. And you not only justify your position, so you don't start from justifying your position, but you need to show validity and you need to actually show that you are on their side and you have given a very deep thought and you agree with their concern. But then on them, after you've built that very solid foundation of being on the same side, then you present your perspective that guarantees to the audience to be more open to receive your reply and see it in a more positive light. So what I want you to think is not to try to cover all the possible questions or all the possible disruptions that come your way. One thing you need to think of is to really concentrate on the things you can control, because constraint is always going to push you to be more creative. The Pareto law says itself, 80% of the results that you get are going to be delivered by 20% you put in. So if you concentrate on the 20% that I've given you to look after the way to handle disruptions, as well as answer the question, this is going to deliver you 80% of the results. There is no need to aim for 100 because this is only going to put pressure on you to be perfect. And that's not what we're aiming for. We are aiming for impactful results. And that allows a little bit of room for imperfection. So let's recap for your tips and tricks at a glance. The first thing to keep in mind for this 20% that I am recommending you to look over is the how. It's absolutely crucial because what you say is important, but how you say it is absolutely crucial. So your voice, body language, and energy need to be on top for you to be able actually to have an impactful presentation and to handle a disruption in an energetic way that is going to not intimidate you, but is going to give you a platform to actually shine even more in the front of your audience. The second thing to remember is to never miss a beat and be spontaneous. It's not about being spontaneous on the spot. It's about preparing and having those stories in the back of your pocket that you can take right out and present to the audience when you have a black screen. And whereas your team is working very hard to fix the screen, you are having a story to tell that seemingly appear right there that you have to present, and you keep the audience engaged. Or like I give you the example in my case, it's something that I launched right into it without giving much thought and actually help prolong the presentation in a much more positive way. And the last thing is to choose your focus and think about only how to handle the mechanics of the question of when you don't know the answer, when you cannot share the answer, and the gotcha questions, because this is going to cover you for most of the cases. And for the other ones, the improvisation, the energy, and the way you deliver are going to cover you on that. So when you really disperse your attention towards multiple areas, this is not going to be a place of growth and a place of you to improve your presentation. Focusing on one area at a time is going to give you the growth you need and is going to help you to perfect the presentation that is going to really, really engage and leave your audience excited about your presentation. So this is how I want you to feel at the end of your presentation, because with confidence and with the tips and tricks that I gave you that don't require hours and hours of investment from your side, but just 60 seconds here, 60 seconds there, you're going to have the full confidence of having a presentation that is going to grab the attention of your audience, have them on the edge of your seat, and absolutely love every single word they hear from you. Thank you so much for your attention today, and I really hope you are taking this with you and are going to implement in the next time you present.
Thank you, Verinea, for these, I would say, extremely important points, which are typically being missed. Maybe the only thing that I can jump in quickly was regarding if you don't know the answer to the question, because I've been in situations where the presenter is like, well, I don't know the answer of that. Or they say, I don't know the answer of that, and I'm going to check later and come back, and then they never come back. So what I think is really important there is, if you don't know the answer of that question, as Verinea mentioned, say that you don't know it, but also make sure that then if you promise to come back to that person with the question, because I think it's quite important for the people. There is one question here which I think is because when you're preparing for your questions or when you're preparing your presentation, there might be a situation when you're like, okay, so what will happen if there are some people that are aggressive to me or are doing something or are saying strange things? So how can we handle those questions that are purely aggressive and that are basically shaming you for appearance or some other personal characteristic?
Absolutely. So the way I'll handle something like this is not about arguing and defending yourself, because the more you defend that aspect that they are trying to emphasize, the more, unfortunately, you're going to step on the territory of the moving sense, and you are going to actually sink way deeper when you try to defend yourself. So what I would recommend in here is to really remember one of the tricks that I mentioned, or one of the techniques rather that I mentioned, is to acknowledge the emotion, but do not feed the emotion. So for instance, when somebody is, let's say right now, my activity is within sustainability. So it's a lot of times when companies are shamed or executives are shamed for their company's practices that are either influencing, giving more CO2 in the atmosphere, or any other activities that are detrimental to our planet. And they are trying to be shamed for that. So acknowledge the emotion, and then don't give it more fuel. So don't step onto the side of being emotional as well. So acknowledge the emotion and actually give an answer to that. So what I would do, for instance, if somebody would be very aggressive and say, sure, you're coming today here to tell us that you want your company to be more sustainable, and a company that would like to be more fast forward thinking. But all you did in the past was actually oil spillage. And this is something that, has been emitted, countless of CO2. So that's a question is actually attacking you. So that's nothing there that is not clear, that it's not being addressed. That's not a friendly question. So what I will do, I will acknowledge the emotion. It seems that the CO2 level emissions are very important to you, and so are to us. So, however, what we've done in the past, we've acknowledged that that is something that needs to change, and that's exactly what we're doing. These are the steps we're taking today to really remedy all our past activities that have actually brought to this situation today. So this is a way to really dispel the tension and actually acknowledge the thing that that person is mentioning. However, it's not something that you need to step on the side of and defend yourself. Acknowledge the situation and show what you're doing right now. If you are being actually attacked for something that is in your appearance, or something that, something that may not look right, one of the techniques that I would like to recommend is from theater. We have sometimes in theater this way where that either the attire or some kind of prompt that you have are not there. And this is something that really could mess up the entire play. So what you do, you improvise on going on that. So if somebody is making fun of something that is physical appearance, for instance, something about your clothes, then I would actually play on that and saying, you know what, this shirt used to be my favorite because I have delivered my first presentation in it, but you're making a valid point. I am going to change it next time. So when you actually step on their side, you take away the flame, the fuel from the aggressiveness, and you step on their side. When you agree with them, that's nothing that they can do about it, because you are not contradicting them. So there's nothing that you give them more food for them to build more aggression on. So you take right away the aggression out of it when you agree with them, but in a more playful way.
Absolutely agree on that. We have Anna here, who I think says it very well in the chat. Be the bigger person. Like don't get trapped in that net of really getting into that emotion, as you mentioned at the beginning. What I also wrote down here for myself is, I really agree with you saying, because we already mentioned it at the beginning in Peter's talk. I really agree with what you're mentioning, that when you see presenters being very they're doing some sort of improvisation or so on, you're like, oh wow, he's a great speaker. And I fully agree with what you said, that they are rehearsing that. So this is a very crucial, I think, moment for public speaking, and it also helps you answer questions that are tricky, that are coming from different directions and are touching different points, because that way you will be more calm. So I definitely agree on that one. There is a question: how much do you as a speaker actually rehearse before your talks?
Okay, I absolutely love this question, because being in the industry for so long, of course, a lot of times people are thinking, sure, by now you should know it and you don't need rehearsals. But I'm not going to give you myself as an example first. I'm going to deter you to an example of how often do you think a president is going to rehearse his or her speech before giving it? It is going to be every single time. It doesn't really matter how much experience you have. If you don't take this as an absolute must rule in your life, then you are not going to be successful at presentation. You need to rehearse every single time. What you gain through multiple practice is that you reduce the time of rehearsal. And I will admit, at the beginning of my career, I would go as long as 1 month before the presentation to prepare and rehearse and really be in tune. But think of it as actors that are learning a role every single time. They are rehearsing with the same intensity every single time, no matter if they're a fresh actor or somebody who is 10 years in the industry. So same goes here. So not only myself, but those that are actually in either high dignitary position or those that are doing this as their career on a daily basis, TV news anchors, or the ones that are actors, are going to still rehearse every single time. All you gain with experience is just shortening a little bit the time frame of your rehearsal, because you are a little bit more attuned with all the tips and tools that I gave you today and that you learned from the other speakers today and yesterday to help you just shorten the time, but never exclude that from your preparation.
I'm going to quote again. Yesterday we heard a great quote, and because I was not part of the story track, Boris was moderating that one, but there was a great quote coming from Scott Carman, that great speakers are always prepared because they are constantly preparing. So this is, I find again very in tune with what you're saying. So to everyone who is listening to us, never underestimate the rehearsals, never drop them away from your preparation for delivering a presentation. And one last question, because we would be running out of time. One last question: what is the line between lying and really telling the truth? Especially if we go back to your example, what if your company is not doing anything to improve your CO2 emissions? What would be your answer then, and you know it? Because
Yes,
I think that it's something that especially executives kind of get challenged with a lot.
Yes. So a lot of times when you you are being challenged and you know the information, but you cannot share it, you still need to actually give something to feed that curiosity and feed that question, because otherwise you are still going to impact your professionalism and expertise if you just say I don't know, or I cannot share, or no comment. That's not what you want to do. So in this case, what I recommend you is to look back at what I suggested to you, reframe something that you have as a company policy that nobody can argue against, because again, this is something that the laws or all the internal companies are being very strict. So you only can share information that is public. However, do keep in mind, and that goes connected to the rehearsal part, have some bites that you do or you are able to share in this case, and you give them something to that. So in this case, if somebody is telling you that, well, your company is not doing anything and you are only contributing to pollution in very high manners, what do you have to say to that? What I will say in this case is that you're right. This is something we have considered, and that's why we have made a priority from now on to only look at things that are going to improve both our products and our customer experience without polluting the environment. So we much agree. We have the same shared common goal here to actually help the environment while still being a profitable company. So all the steps that we are taking from now on, starting 2020, for instance, or 2021, are going to absolutely be directed at only limiting the impact and helping the environment. So that's how you deliver a question where you are in control of the narrative and you are not giving space or flame or food to a question that is aggressive towards you, and still give a powerful answer.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. It's the, reframing questions and making sure you answer them in the most politically correct and right way. It's for sure an art, but definitely a topic that I'm very excited that we managed to touch on during the conference. So, Verinea, thanks a lot for being with us and joining us from the Arctic Circle. There was a little bit of a glitches on the internet, but I'm sure people will understand why that might be happening. For sure, everyone is going to get a recording of this session. So Verinea's tips are really interesting and really useful that you can apply, I think, right away. So make sure that after you get your recordings, you also check on that and you can prepare for the questions that you might get asked during your next presentation. Thank you, Verinea.
Thank you, Eva. And good luck to everyone else in learning and becoming really fantastic presenters.